Welcome to the VP Marketing Show, podcast that takes you deep inside high-performing marketing teams to learn what they do, how they do it, and how they get better every day. We cover strategy and execution, brand and demand, metrics and team structure, today's realities, and tomorrow's opportunities. If you lead a marketing team, you aspire to the top job, or you're a CEO who hires and manages a VP marketing, this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the VP Marketing Show. I'm your host, Steve Watt, and today's guest is Justin Keller, VP Marketing at Sigstr. We had a fantastic conversation. We started off with Justin's game show prowess, got into some awards that Sigstrs won and why, and we talked about Justin's relationship marketing manifesto and why he thinks real changes are needed in the way many of us go to market. We talked about why ABM has become really central to what Sigstr does, how they've realigned accordingly, and why the large SDR team now reports into marketing. We talked about their evolving metrics, some career advice, and much more. Please welcome Justin Keller, VP Marketing from Sigstr. Justin, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. I'm excited.
I'm super stoked to have you on the show. We have not known each other for a long time at all. In fact, we met just a few weeks ago in Boston at the B2B SMX show, where I had the dubious honor of hosting the ABM game show. And Justin, you were a superstar contestant who ran away with that thing. I could not believe the speed and accuracy with which you were able to solve the problems and win that game show. Do you have some sort of past in game shows, or are you just like amazing at pattern recognition, or what was going on there?
I don't know. I remember before the game show, you and I were talking, and we were talking to the group. Like, I think, we got 7 or 8 questions. These should last us the full 30 minutes. And I remember getting up there, and the first problem, like, we didn't even need the clue. I think it was right off the bat we got. I don't remember what the answer was. But I was like, oh shit, we may, maybe we're better at this than we thought. I think it was just a weird, perfect storm of, hey, I've been drinking the ABM Kool-Aid for, 2 years now. And I love a good, Reader's Digest puzzle. I think it was just the perfect Venn diagram of those two things.
Yeah. I was a little worried when you got that first one in 3 seconds. Fortunately, it took you a little longer on the others, and the other contestants got in there with a few wins as well. But man, you were a superstar. You obviously are really good at solving problems with incomplete information. I think that's a lot about what marketing's about, isn't it?
It totally is. Oh my gosh, yes.
So tell us about Sigstr.
Yeah, Sigstr is a really awesome marketing tech startup. We've been around for about 4 years, and the really short version of it is that we think that the one-to-one emails, those Gmail and Outlook emails that people send every day, have a lot of under-realized potential. So what we've done is we've created a system that inserts a targeted display ad at the bottom of every one of those emails that goes out, no matter who's emailing it. The person that opens that email, Sigstr knows who it is and will deliver the most relevant content to them. So that adds dynamic. And then out of that, we get a lot of really phenomenal analytics, not just like, who's opening emails, but how strong is the relationship between the people that are creating these emails? If they're in a sales cycle, does it look like there's intent to buy? We don't read any emails. We're just kind of looking at patterns here, and we're able to produce some really interesting stuff out of it.
Is that always account-based? Is it specific to an account, or are we talking perhaps industry-based SIG files, all kinds of other messages as well? Like, this goes beyond ABM, right?
Exactly. It's pretty much, if it's a super high volume channel. The average employee sends between 10,000 and 20,000 emails every year. And it's if you can segment it, you can target with Sigstr, right? So if it's an industry thing, absolutely. You can put, everyone that's in the manufacturing industry on a list, and they will get a industry relevant case study. Same thing with geographies. If we're going to do a roadshow in Chicago, we can draw a line around Chicago and say, anytime we deliver an email to someone that's in this geo, make sure they get invited to the Chicago roadshow. And people in Seattle will have no idea. They won't get bothered with irrelevant messages.
You hear so many different pieces of advice around email marketing. And one of them is you hear that any kind of links, any kind of embedded files, anything like that can cause deliverability problems. And you should just go like super plain, old school text. I imagine you guys have solved for that. What's your answer to someone who says, "Well, I think that this is going to cause me a deliverability problem"?
Yeah, our heritage is we've got a bunch of people that came from Exact Target here in Indianapolis, which was later acquired by Salesforce. But basically, email nerds to the nth degree that know all the ins and outs about how to get emails delivered, and the technology itself is not, we're not pasting an image into an email. It senses when the person opens, pulls the content into it. So it's real-time content. It's not an image isn't writing along with the email. It's displaying on open. So not an issue with our customers.
You guys have won a bunch of awards recently. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, we've won. It's really uncanny. I haven't. I think it's kind of lightning in a bottle. But we won an ABM. You have to flip my funnel awards. We get the Zoom Info Champions Award. We got a couple awards. We recently got the Connex Tech Partner of the Year Award from Uberflip. We're really great partners with those guys. And then I think the one I'm most proud of those, we got at B2BMX earlier this year, the Killer Content Awards. We got, I believe it was a pipeline acceleration campaign, or no, it was a customer content campaign. But then we won the B2B Choice Award, which is kind of like the gold medal of content awards there. And we got that for this piece we did called the September issue, which is kind of a nod to Vogue's annual September issue, which is like 1,000 pages long and kind of the big issue for them every year. And what we did, we were kind of inspired by it because it's just, I mean, it's page after page of really good looking, fashion models, whatever. And we wanted to do the same thing with our customers. Our customers are doing really amazing stuff with Sigstr, with the campaigns they're running, with how they're targeting them. And we really just wanted to showcase all the great work they're doing. And so we compiled all of the best performing, best looking campaigns that our customers did that year and published it. And so it was phenomenally useful because it inspired a lot of other, companies that are using Sigstr on what they could do with it. And it showed off all the cool work that really cool companies are doing with us. And, it was like, I mean, not a huge lift for us because they were doing the content. We were just kind of putting it on a pedestal and showing it off in the way it deserved.
And the latest September edition is out now?
That is coming out. I think as of the time this podcast is running, it will be live. I'm sure we'll be making a lot of noise about it on Sigstr.com, but so it'll be the second issue following the award-winning inaugural issue.
Nice. And I imagine that anyone who spends any amount of time on LinkedIn and Twitter and other platforms like many of us do will have no trouble finding this.
I'll guarantee you we're going to not shut up about it for a little while.
I love it. Hey, Justin, I want to get into some of the topics that I always get into with my guests. We're going to talk about the structure of your marketing team. We're going to talk about your metrics. We're going to talk about some other operational things. But before we get there, I recently read a piece that you wrote called The Relationship Marketing Manifesto. And you made some pretty impassioned pleas to marketers to think differently. Mm-hmm. Tell us what's driving your thinking there.
Technology is great, super awesome, and it allows us to do a lot of things with a lot less effort than we used to be able to do. But if you think back in time to, the first sales and marketing people, it was all about developing relationships, right? Think back to Avon parties way back in the day, right? Avon became one of the biggest companies ever, and it started out just by having people work with their friends and kind of their network. And I think at the end of the day, all marketers, all we're trying to do is build a relationship between our brand and our audience. And you don't need tech for that, right? If you're focusing on the right thing, you're trying to get in front of the right people, developing, using all that marketing muscle to develop relationships is I think better for the bottom line, but I feel like it also makes marketing a lot more fun. And I feel like it's the right thing to do as a marketer, rather than trying to pollute the world with a lot of digital noise and, loud campaigns. Being smart and being, having your heart in the right place, I think produces a much more powerful marketing program.
There certainly is a swing of the pendulum back towards humanity in a lot of marketing. I'm convinced that so many things in our world are these swinging pendulums where they go all to one extreme. Marketing went super hardcore, digital, data, scaled. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some great things about that, but then there's something lost. And I think now the pendulum's swinging back and we're seeing a lot more humanity, a lot more authenticity, a welcoming of the idea that things can be less than super polished and be more off the cuff and more putting individuals out in front as well. Instead of it's always the big brand voice, it's the individual.
Yeah,
It's Justin on LinkedIn talking about something, it's Steve talking about something, and not necessarily the brand. Is what you're talking about, is it part of that pendulum swinging back towards, or is there more to it even than that?
No, I think that's undoubtedly what it is. I think, we get, like, the last 15 years especially, we had so many tools. I mean, starting with marketing automation and CRM that, were the hubs of everything we were doing. And now, I mean, I don't remember how, like, Scott Brinker just released his new thing, but I think it's like 9,000 marketing technologies at this point, right? It's so many that it's useless at that point, right? I think the pendulum's totally swinging back, and I think that people have been calling it ABM, right? And I don't think that's all ABM is, but I think that is kind of how it's emerged or how it's manifested itself, right? Is that ABM allows you to, focus on just the right people for you, deliver a very clear message, and not have to spray and pray and be kind of a smarmy, scammy marketer.
It's a welcome change, and I think, Dave Gerhardt from Drift makes some, really good points. He's been talking recently a lot about his 10 commandments of modern marketing. And one of them is the personal brand trumps the corporate brand. And I mean, he himself is a great example of, he's everywhere and he's, a super authentic marketing thought leader. But you see that, and it's not just him, it's all across Drift, and it's all across lots of other people as well. You see that the putting the people first is that something that you and others are purposefully doing? Are you saying, like, let's get our people out in front, or do you still lead more with the corporate brand, or how do you think about that?
I think it is a little of both. I don't think we go out of our way to put individuals in front. We definitely have super brilliant, talented individuals that we are thrilled to get out in front of people. But I think for us, really what we're trying to do is make Sigstr feel human, right? Have the brand feel like it's a person that you can identify with. I think that's that's what B2C is getting really, really damn good at, is being the kind of brand that you want to be friends with. Wendy's does an awesome job of this. Glossier does a really good job of this. Brands that people want to interact with. And I think that's ultimately, like, I don't think we're ever going to be as good as those, and it's tough for a B2B brand to be that good. But that's kind of what we're trying to do, is make Sigstr feel really human. We actually have I don't know what you call him. I guess he's an archetype, but we've got this guy called Sean, who is kind of the manifestation of Sigstr's culture and values. And, if Sigstr was a person, it would be Sean. And anytime the marketing team has a question on how should we phrase something, or does this tweet sound too, braggy or whatever, we say, is that something Sean would say? And that's kind of like, our shared filter on, how we talk about things. And so I think that, Sean is basically a result of every person at Sigstr coming together.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. We're all accustomed to having our customer personas and saying, is this something Susan would like or whatever, yeah. But you're turning it internal as well. Is this something Sean would say? Is this something Sean would do? I like it. That's a really smart approach, I think. Hey, let's talk about your team specifically. How big is your marketing team, and how are they structured, and why?
Yeah, it is. It's newly bigger. So historically, it's been 4 people. It's been myself. We got a director of marketing that really runs our content program, phenomenal content program. We've got a senior demand gen manager who has never met a machine that she couldn't tame and make work for us. And then we've got a really talented designer and web developer. Recently, like as of a month ago, we kind of reorganized how our outbound team works. So we have a wonderful director of outbound sales dev who ended up becoming really part and parcel to our ABM program, right? And I think that we'll get into in a minute on why I think that, especially for an ABM-oriented company, an outbound team should live in marketing. But we moved her over to the marketing team and changed her title from, senior SDR director to senior ABM director. And she now owns our ABM program. And to her reports about, I think it's 9 sales dev reps and 1 sales dev manager. So they are now all part of the marketing team.
So your marketing team tripled in size in one fell swoop by answering a question that I think a lot of companies are debating about. And you mentioned it there a moment ago. Should sales dev report to sales because it's often the talent bench for future AEs, and it's about nurturing them along that journey, or should they report into marketing, because especially in an ABM world, they are a critical part of that? You guys have answered with the latter.
I think the most common objection is the one that you pointed out, that the sales dev team is kind of a feeder for the sales team. And I think that's probably true in a lot of places, but at least at Sigstr, we definitely see our sales dev team as kind of the farm team to, ultimately grow into more senior roles here at Sigstr. But what we've seen is, sure, some of them went into sales roles, just as many people went into product roles or customer success roles, right? I don't think that, I think that there's probably a few exceptions where a sales dev person accepts a job being like, hell yeah, this is my path to being a salesperson. No, it's like, sounds like a good foot in the door. It's typically a younger person. And the reason I think and feel so strongly that they should report to marketing is because they are the front line of your brand. When I was a younger marketer and I was I felt less responsible or less like a steward of our brand, what I used to do, I just send thousands of leads a month to the sales dev team and expect 2% of them to become opportunities. I didn't care what they did or how they did it. And now that I care so much about what we say, how we say it, how the brand is reflected through these people, having them super aligned to the marketing team just feels like the right thing to do, because they are super aligned on all the programs we're running, how we talk about things, how we think about things. And, if you treat them right, they become like the most intelligent and ferocious part of a marketing program. If they are kind of focusing on the right people, telling the right stories, and doing the right things to represent your brand, you can't buy that kind of technology. That's the human aspect that, we were talking about. And it is beautifully, exemplified by a smart outbound team like that.
That's a big sales dev team for a company of your size. Obviously, you guys have made a meaningful investment there because it works. Tell us a little bit about how they operate. In a lot of organizations, SDRs are very much phone-based.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there's some of that, but I also imagine there's some smart email work, given the business you're in. I imagine there's some social. How does that team operate, and what are they driving towards? What are they ultimately accountable for?
That's a good question. So it is, I think, probably not too dissimilar from a lot of, functionally how a lot of outbound teams behave. I think strategically the way we help them, though, is pretty interesting. We always try to keep things new and interesting with that team, because it's a grind, man. That is a tough job, and if you're doing it day in and day out, you're going to burn out. Your productivity and performance will both suffer. So we do a few things. We typically, and we try to have them weekly, but it's usually longer than that. Campaigns, right, where they are focused on a persona, or one of our partners' customers, or our target account list. We kind of give them a variety of targets to go out and hit, and they are measured. Really, it's setting appointments is the name of the game. And I know every SaaS company I worked at and everyone I've been a part of is that's the ultimate goal. But the way we're starting to measure that specifically is evolving. As we bear down more and more on an account-based program, we are starting to get more and more focused on just those accounts. And so it's not volume-based performance necessarily. We do have kind of call blitzes and times where it's like, let's really grind some work out. But then backing up and saying, no, take your time and get really strategic with this account. We don't care if you send 50 emails and make 40 calls. Make 2 emails or make 2 calls that really count and really matter with this one account, and try and generate an opportunity, because they are ideal customer profile. They're exactly the kind of customer we want using Sigstr. And so that's kind of one of those things that's in flux. We're doing a little bit of both, right? We're doing kind of the performance-based measurement, but then we're trying to really get them to be smart and strategic, and not be, a robot, but be a really smart human that is generating relationships at big companies.
I think the smart companies are moving away from activity metrics and much more towards outcome metrics. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're well on that path. Beyond meetings booked, what are some of the other metrics that, and not just the SDR team, but your marketing team as a whole? What are your North Star metrics that you're driving towards?
Oh man, they have changed a lot in the past 2 years, and they're still changing. At the end of the day, the only one that's been constant is revenue and pipeline, right? Are we doing enough to generate enough pipeline to hit our revenue target? And I don't think that it's ever going to change, nor should it. but how like kind of the leading indicators for those things have changed. When it started out, when I joined Sigstr about 2 years ago, I think it was like 2080 was the percent of I believe demos or revenue that was sourced from marketing to sales. So sales was responsible for 80% of the sales. Our immediate goal was let's make it 50-50. Let's build some programs, get some leads in the door so that we can get 50-50. And 2 quarters, we were beating that number. And at this point, we kind of started to catch fire, and we were getting a really healthy inbound program coming up. And it became the thing where it's like, you know what, let's just focus on one number. Say outbound and inbound shares one demo or appointment number. And now it's kind of evolving again, right? So we had kind of a champagne problem where we were booking enough demos to hit our quarterly goal and generating more leads than we were touching, right? We had so many people coming in the front door that we were being a little, I don't know what the word is, a little, I mean, definitely like, I mean, it gets lazy, right? We had enough leads that we were like, well, we're going to hit our number anyway. Let's not build new programs to turn these leads that, kind of came in from a webinar or event or whatever into appointments. And so now we're going back all the way, the pendulum swinging all the way back again, Steve, to kind of good old blocking and tackling marketing, right? Where, sure, we're hitting our numbers and we're beating our lead number. We really need to be crushing that so much harder than we are doing, right? So we were kind of like resting on our laurels, and now we're getting back to basics. It's like Indiana basketball time in the marketing department here, where we're really just trying to build out programs that are nurturing and helping these leads to learn more about Sigstr and hopefully take the call.
You guys are in an interesting place. You mentioned Uber Flip and a few other companies are in the same kind of thing. You are part of an ABM stack, and you yourself are ABM practitioners. How ABM centric is your own approach to the market? And are you still doing more broad-based demand gen? And if you're doing both, do you measure them differently, or does it all boil down to the same metrics regardless?
That's an awesome question. I think, I think it'd be crazy for some company to be like, oh yeah, screw all that demand gen stuff. We're just going to go all ABM, right? You have to do both. You don't want to miss one thing in favor of another. And I think that luckily a lot of the practices overlap between the two strategies or the two, trains of thought. So yeah, we do traditional demand gen. I mean, we've been really, stepping down on SEO, like good old SEO. That's something we avoided for a long time, but we're making a lot of investments in now. Advertising is not a huge thing for us because we're just kind of a niche category, right? There's not a whole lot of organic traffic out there. We do invest a lot in ABM advertising though. So it's one of these things where at some point the two overlap, right? As soon as you get a qualified opportunity in the door, they become a target account, right? We will light up personalized campaigns for them. We will start following around the internet with targeted ads through Terminus. And we do all that upfront to, every quarter or every 2 quarters, pick a set of, 150 tier 1 accounts and about 900 tier 2 accounts. And we'll focus really intensely on them too, right? And we will align our outbound team to them. We'll build special campaigns just for them. So we're doing both. But really, I'd say ABM is probably, and what is ABM, right? Personalized, smart campaigning to the important individuals in our orbit is about 70% of the work we do. The other 30% is to try and get more people into that orbit.
How do you think about aspects of marketing that are a little harder to measure, like building a powerful brand? So back to the swinging pendulum metaphor that we keep coming back to, I think that as we all embraced data-driven digital modern marketing and everything is measurable, and if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen, and all these sort of philosophies, that in a lot of organizations, brand building fell a little bit to the wayside because it's really hard to measure, especially for a small or mid-sized company that's not going to go out and run some massive brand reach and sentiment studies. And I think in a lot of organizations that pendulum is swinging back and saying, no, even if it's hard to measure, we know that building a brand really floats all boats and drives every other metric. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing a deepened reinvestment in brand. Where are you guys at on that? I mean, how much of your time and energy and money do you spend on building the Sigstr brand, even if it doesn't seem to immediately drive specific metrics?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Steve. I think I can try and answer like this. I will say we've never made an investment purely for brand, right? We've always had kind of an ROI in mind with any investment we've made. That said, any investment we're going to make, whether it's trade shows, content, advertising, what have you, we pour as much of our brand soul into it as we can, and try and make it feel very Sigstr. So we do spend a lot of time thinking about our brand, but we don't measure it. Like, I don't think you can measure brand. I know that there's a lot of companies out there that'll, help massive consumer companies measure their brand sentiment, stuff like that. I just don't think it's useful for a lot of B2B companies. And I think really the way you measure it is, you hear people talk about you. You come back from, a road show, and, more people have heard of Sigstr when you talk to them at the booth or whatever. It's something you feel. I don't think it's something you can really measure, though. And it's something that we've definitely felt here. And it's kind of like how it's working is, the CEO will say, wow, I'm just amazed with how many people had already heard of Sigstr at this thing I was at. But it's one of those things, again, like I said earlier, right? It's just it feels like the right thing to do. Like, you want to build a relationship with your audience, and, they can build a relationship with some people at your company, but it's really the company itself that is, what makes that brand possible.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying. And I experienced that related to you guys just a few weeks ago in Boston, where I think the Sigstr name came up in 3 different presentations, and, maybe 1 or 2 hallway conversations in the first morning. And I was like, okay, I need to know more about Sigstr. Like, I kind of knew what you guys did, but I didn't fully appreciate it. And it was just, there was this fear of missing out, this sense of, okay, they're being name dropped everywhere. I don't know enough about them. I need to fix that. I mean, that's a powerful thing, right? Hard to measure, hard to make happen. But when that does happen, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one feeling that, and that really has got to be one of the mountaintops of brand building, when people feel like, if I don't understand who these guys are and what they do, then I'm not fully doing my job. That's an amazing place to be. And I think you guys are getting there through all the great work that you're doing.
That means a whole lot to me. I appreciate that very much. And I think if you could sell that, every CMO listening to this right now would be pulling out their checkbook, and the good thing is you can't, right? It takes hard work, and it takes just kind of consistency.
What's next for you guys? You've made this move with bringing the outbound sales team into marketing. You are deep into ABM. Mm-hmm. You're building your brand in a lot of smart ways. What's next? Is there something that either you have not really gotten to yet, but you're going to, or perhaps something that you're doing now, but you need to make bigger investments in?
I think one of the things we've done that I think has been really helpful for the company is building a lot of strategic relationships with other marketing technologies and integrating to them, right? Really, we think of email as just being like a massive source of traffic. And so, who wouldn't want to kind of build their tool into, kind of like divert that stream of traffic into their tool. One thing we haven't capitalized on as well as we should have is really kind of the follow through and making sure that we are helping those companies and their customers get the full benefit. So we've kind of carved off a channel and partner team now, where we're just going to be focusing on those partners, making sure that they're successful, and that we're kind of doing everything we can to help them out. That's a big focus for us now. And one thing I've been hearing and has come up a few times is user conference, and that scares me to death to think about. But it seems like, and I don't know how I feel about this, Steve, but it seems like kind of like one of those we've made it moments is when you have your first user conference. And, I'm not sure we're there yet.
That's funny. That has come up in a few of the other interviews I've done. And it makes so much sense in so many ways, getting face-to-face with your customers, building those relationships, deepening your people's understanding of your customers in a very real way. But yeah, there comes a point as a marketer, if I've got 15 tools in my stack, how many user conferences am I really going to go to?
Exactly. Exactly. So I think, yeah, we're trying to figure out how do we, I mean, we have enough customers and enough users that I think we could fill a room. But yeah, that share of wallet almost, like how many plane tickets are people going to buy to go visit their vendors, right? I don't think, I don't know. And real quick, Brian, my CEO, if you're listening to this, I promise you we're going to do user conference. I just want to make sure we do it the right way. So that's one of those things where I think, I mean, I wonder if it becomes kind of, I mean, we build a lot of alliances, and maybe it's kind of pulling together, a lot of our friends and kind of putting on our own conference where there's tracks for each vendor or something like that. So we can kind of, mitigate the risk and kind of share the lift together of making a successful conference happen.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I have long admired the way many of the ABM technology vendors work so well together. And there just seem to be so many different conferences, events, training sessions, parties, what have you, where it's brought to you by 2 or 3 or 5 of these companies that are collaborating. And I think it makes a lot of sense because they do share a common purpose in many cases, or at least a similarly aligned purpose. And they do share a lot of customer base. And from the perspective of the person who's deciding, you mentioned share of wallet, but it's also share of time, to go. If I can kind of go and bond with 4 or 5 of my tech partners or my parts of my stack rather than one, that's probably going to be pretty appealing to me as a time constrained marketing leader.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the way to go. And, hopefully, we get to share each other's audiences, right? And meet people and tell stories that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to.
One last thing before I let you go, Justin. Lots of people aspire to a role like yours. They are working their way up through a marketing career or some other part of this world in which we operate. And it can seem almost overwhelming, all the different ways they could spend their time learning, the sorts of roles they ought to focus on, the capabilities that they should be building. And some people will tell them, oh, you've got to be all about data. And others will say you got to be all about brand or all about content and communications or all about the people. And there's just not time to follow all that advice. What advice do you have for a aspiring marketing leader of the future?
That's a great question. And, I think about that myself sometimes, like, wow, how did I get here? This seems completely by accident. I think the 3 things for me, though, was you got to put in the work. There was so much grinding between, when I was a 22-year-old in some crappy cubicle to now, that it's easy to lose sight of how much work just went into it, but you got to do the work. I think you've got to fake it till you make it. So there was a time in my career where I packed up my bags, I moved to San Francisco and acted like I'd always been leading B2B marketing teams when in fact I had never done it. It was uncomfortable and difficult, and I definitely got my ass kicked dozens of times. And now it's, now it's true. Now I know what I'm doing. And then the third thing, and I think this is kind of maybe the most important thing, is kind of just the emotional intelligence and self-awareness piece, right? Because I think that kind of factors into all the things you mentioned between brand and demand and people and management, kind of understanding who you are, your place in the world, and how your behavior and your activities ripple through it. I think is kind of, it's just like a core senior leadership skill that I think people need to have. And I think that's something that people recognize in other, young leaders.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much for joining us, Justin. I really appreciate it. I have very much enjoyed and very much learned from our conversation. I trust that that's true for our listeners as well. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for taking some time out of your day to chat with us today.
Thank you so much, Steve. I cannot wait to hear this and share it with the world.
This has been Justin Keller, VP Marketing at Sigstr. Thanks for listening to the VP Marketing Show. We hope you'll join us next time.